I played Resident Evil Requiem, and I am so excited to finally get— No! No, not yet! No, please, not yet! Okay, let's try that again. So, since Resident Evil Requiem was revealed at SGF last year, admittedly, I've had some conflicting feelings about it. Even having played the demo twice, it was hard to get a grasp of what this Resident Evil was trying to do that previous installments hadn't already done. But now, I've played 3 hours of it, and I can tell you I have a confident grasp of exactly what this Resident Evil is trying to do, and it absolutely f***ing ruled. Okay, so before I get into it, I do want to do a little housekeeping and address what will likely be the most frequent inquiries concerning the game. And yes, you can play both Grace and Leon in first or third person, and it can be changed at any time in the menu settings. However, the game does default Grace in first person and Leon in third, and I actually think this makes the most sense for how these sections are designed, but it's up to you. Now for the Grace-Leon split. Now, from the preview that I played, it's hard to say whether or not it's going to be 50-50, but from how the sections I played as Grace, the way they were designed, I have a feeling you're gonna be playing as Grace a whole lot more, but I think this will ultimately favor the pacing of the full game if it sticks the landing upon its release. For context, out of the 3.5-ish hours I played, I was Grace for just about 2.5 of those hours, and just Leon for a small snip in the opening and closing. But I assure you, I think this is gonna be for the better. Also, quick note, the flip-flop between them does seem scripted, like it's gonna be paced out very deliberately and you can't do it at any time, but I think I'll have a clearer answer of that when the game releases. All right, now here's something a lot of you folks have been speculating about. It is not open world, as the director of the game, Nakanishi-san, told me himself. But he says that when players get their hands on with a game, the way it's paced, the way it's designed, will make much more sense. So, time will tell. And lastly, from my experience with Requiem, it feels more like a continuation of 2 and 4, rather 7 and 8, with the exception that big, beautiful things will still be chasing you around. And by things, I mean a whole lot more of them, and beautiful is absolutely gonna be totally subjective. Oh yeah, and chainsaws. Chainsaws. Chainsaws.
Nice.
The preview kicked off with Leon showing up to whatever this private medical facility is, and from the looks of it, it appears he had an appointment, in fact. And it is not long until things go awry, people are killed, zombies appear, and Leon is throwing out one-liners.
I think I want a second opinion.
Now, this might sound hyperbolic, but the encounter that pursues in that short moment could be one of my absolute favorite zombie encounters in a Resident Evil game to date. It starts off with a doctor zombie holding a chainsaw and flailing it wildly. And while it's happening, zombies are awakening from their hospital beds all around Leon in this very tight corridor, intense situation. This is one of the most inventive uses of a chainsaw I've seen in a video game, and here's why. The chainsaw, you can shoot out of a zombie's hands, but when you shoot it out of a zombie's hands, it also spins on the ground. So if you walk near it, it cuts your feet, but that means it also cuts the feet of other zombies. Zombies can also pick the chainsaw back up and flail it at you, and if they miss, they can shove it right into another zombie. And that zombie may walk off with a chainsaw stuck in its chest and even get caught in a wall while it just gets chainsawed up. It was very reminiscent of sort of this slapstick, over-the-top gore comedy that just reminds me of Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, or Dead Alive, for those of you who know. If you don't know about Brain Dead, Dead Alive, watch it. It has one of the greatest scenes involving zombies in a lawnmower ever. Ever.
Party's over.
So yeah, Leon plays exactly like Resident Evil 4, and if anything, a little extra too. So in this case, Leon has a hatchet, which doesn't just operate like a knife that you swing back and forth. Leon's like throwing combos down. and it also leads to lots and lots of takedowns. This whole segment only lasted about 10 minutes, but it flew by, and the chainsaw became a prominent part even in the design of the level because you need to use the chainsaw in order to cut the door down to get to the next section, which in the process destroys the chainsaw. So it has more purpose than just being an element of combat, but actually, in a way, a key to the next section, which I thought was clever. So yeah, it's safe to say from this section, Leon is full Resident Evil 4 mode and then some. The hatchet is the new knife. The hatchet can be sharpened on the spot. There's more variety in takedowns, but it feels like you are gonna be dealing with more tense combat in smaller sort of rooms, even compared to Resident Evil 4, which is a good twist on a familiar form and still keeps that fight or flight sort of white knuckle experience from those Resident Evil games that I personally love so much. Another touch is Leon's inventory system is the same as it was in Resident Evil 4. He has the briefcase, but in this case, for the nerds who care, it's more like the UI from Resident Evil Village than 4, so yeah. Now, when this section's all said and done, it is not long until Leon and Grace come face to face, and this happens directly after the end of the last preview involving Grace that I played all those moons ago. So just as Grace gets torn back into the darkness by the big-eyed, tall, scary woman, it is Leon who comes to her rescue and shoots the thing dead.
Hey, over here.
But that is before a cage door comes down between them, trapping them apart. And of all weapons for Leon to give Grace, for some reason, it's his idea to be like, hey, here's the biggest gun I have. Have this gun that is the size of your arm. Buddy, here you go, Grace. It weighs as much as you. Have fun. And then he walks away. Also, the gun was awesome.
Jesus.
So that's how Leon plays. But what about Grace? My only context for Grace before was the preview I played in which Grace was just sneaking around without her ability to defend herself, with the exception of throwing a few bottles to distract big-eyed monster lady. But to my surprise, this section with Grace feels almost identical in a very good way to specifically Resident Evil 2. Now in this section, Grace is thrown into a big old section of the facility. The facility itself, this medical facility, in design, if anything, is basically the Resident Evil 1 mansion. You have a big old lobby, a door at the center that requires 3 keys to open, a pathway on your left to go to that is unlocked, and a pathway on your right that is locked. Both of those sections eventually open up into big, sprawling, maze-like areas that require keys and puzzle solvings and things to grab and backs and forths and all that jazz. The Resident Evil 2 part of it is because the zombies behave like how the zombies do in Resident Evil 2, which started to really inspire me. One of my problems with Resident Evil Village and 7 was how rigid the enemies were. While Village has a plethora of many, many enemy types, their movements were predictable. Their movements and how they interact with the environment felt scripted and rigid. In Resident Evil 2, the zombies had almost improbability. Shooting their legs off, watching them crawl around, and then leaving them there to get around and zip to another area created this risk reward. It took less ammunition because you knew you could basically paralyze one and you can get past them, but it creates the risk of having to go back and deal with it at a different time. And that's the mentality I love about Resident Evil games, and this was doing it full force. But these aren't just your typical zombies. These zombies can talk. They're yapping. They're mumbling a bunch. They're talking about cleaning bathrooms. They're talking about how much they hate lights. There's 2 zombies that were even walking with one another, like mumbling a conversation that was completely incoherent. And this is because the zombies are fresh. That is the director's sort of approach to this. That these zombies that you're encountering had just churned, and that parts of them are still lingering with them. So those personality traits are still there, and it's absolutely brilliant. And if it reminded me of anything, it's actually BioShock. Coming around the corner as Grace and seeing a zombie woman cleaning a mirror obsessively and like mumbling to herself and talking about how clean it needs to be, it feels like the splicers from BioShock. Sneaking around that environment and seeing them talk to themselves like the woman who you thought is caressing a baby in a carriage only just to be caressing a gun. It's kind of the same concept, but done in Resident Evil, and it kind of rules. It gives every single enemy encounter a sense of personality, where I think the Ganados in Resident Evil 4 were always fantastic and iconic in the way that they talked to you and communicated with you. This is the same feeling, but feels even almost more eerie because they're speaking in a language I can understand, and it feels manic and incoherent and just all around eerie. And I didn't even really talk about how the zombies vary, because each one has a distinctive personality. That means they react to certain things and different things. For example, one zombie might be obsessed with turning lights off, so you can actually use that to your advantage to turn a light on and have a zombie come to that switch to then try and turn it off. I also encountered a cook zombie. This cook zombie was a big, brawling brute of a man, and I assure you, I totally underestimated him when I tried taking him on. I was like, hey, I'll shoot him in the face like a couple times like these other guys. Not happening. The man has meals to make. And this was interesting because it didn't feel like Resident Evil was just creating these obvious archetypes of new enemies, but it actually made me look at each individual zombie encounter as like this unique sort of thing, kind of teaching me to not over or underestimate any given situation, that basically anytime I encounter a zombie, it could react a way that I was not prepared for, and that is awesome. Now, in the vein of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7 design, Grace only has 8 slots in her inventory, but can be expanded slowly by finding extra pouches laying around. So even though Leon has a full arsenal of cool moves and a big old inventory to hold on to, playing as Grace completely context switches you into having to deal with situations totally differently. Now, while stealthing around is kind of the main focus, the thing that I think makes this feel like an evolution of Resident Evil 2 is that you now have a lot more tools at your disposal and how you maneuver an environment, but that does not mean you can avoid having to attack things. Instead, you just have to be a little bit more clever. Grace is also, her entire section is resource management, resource management, resource management. More so than any other Resident Evil game I've played, but it works. Now, I mentioned she gets a big old magnum from Leon, and that's basically like your one-shot kill, last resort sort of gun you want to use. You do not want to use that gun against normal enemies. Grace does eventually find a normal pistol to use. Grace also has a melee attack that you can prompt when stunning an enemy, which is still very useful when you're strategically shoving a zombie into another group of zombies and the kind of domino effect over, giving you the chance to run. Stealth and resource management are intertwined because there are situations you just need to deal with and use ammo to get through, while stealth feels like it is a solution to that. Like, oh, I can just get around this situation without having to use ammo. That's not the case. Stealth is still a thing you need to be cognizant of. Suffice to say, I spent a lot of time conserving my ammo, shooting lots of legs out, tiptoeing around dudes, going through different environments, only to realize I had to go back through the same environments to deal with the exact same enemies again and make the same decision. Do I shoot another leg out? Do I just take them out? Do I risk spending all my ammunition? Do I use the big old giant magnum gun to take out a thing at the risk of finding something down the line that I should have saved it for? All those things are rushing through your head constantly. Now, crafting is also a big deal for Grace. You now have an additional craft material, which is basically blood. You actually suck blood up from out of bodies, giving a reward to killing enemies. Not only are you clearing paths for the future, but you actually can take a resource from them. With that resource, you actually can use it to craft stuff like bullets when combined with scraps. Don't ask me about the science. I'm not here to make sense of that. That's not my job in the Resident Evil world. I don't play with that. Some other lore junkie can figure it out. There's also another layer to Grace's crafting. In order to get recipes to make stuff like ammunition, health, certain items you'll need in the future, you'll need to find lab samples, which can only be processed at a certain station in certain rooms of the facility. When you do it, you are then prompted with a puzzle of basically solving these molecules. Once you solve that puzzle, you are then given a new recipe. So there are a few extra steps and layers to being able to give Grace what she needs to be able to rock on through this House of Terror.
I'll be fine. I hope.
In the 2.5 hours I played as Grace, over and over and over again, the rug was pulled beneath my feet. There were moments that completely took me off guard, that had me screaming, that had me laughing and screaming, but it all was good because I was constantly on the edge of my seat, never entirely feeling comfortable. It was like Mr. X of Resident Evil 2, but happened 3 times in a row, or the Crimson Heads from Resident Evil 1 thrown right in my face all over again. All right, so the last thing I wanted to end this on is a bit of the story stuff, which is still kind of, I don't know, it's Resident Evil. So it's hard to say. And based on the 3 hours I played, not much more was really revealed that the trailers haven't already shown. The one thing I got a better look at is who I assume is the antagonist, or at least one of them, which is Victor Gideon. Victor Gideon is basically kind of like a Jigsaw-like dude who's setting off booby traps and clearly orchestrating a lot of the stuff that's happening. He's the one who is watching Leon and Grace do their thing in the hallways. He's the one who set the gate fall between the two. He's clearly in control. He's goofy, which I know is not saying a lot considering Resident Evil, but even to me, he's kind of almost teetering on a new sort of goofiness that I haven't really seen Resident Evil attempt. He's not quite Salazar silly from Resident Evil 4, and he's not quite Heisenberg eccentric like from Village. He's kind of given Ashford twin vibes from Code Veronica, and which could be divisive, depending on who you ask.
I am Alfred Ashford, commander of this base.
Now, there are some additional story elements at play, but I actually don't want to talk about them. And Capcom was pretty open with what I can talk about, with the exception of one thing, but even if I could, I wouldn't want to spoil anything for other Resident Evil folks, because all I can tell you as a die-hard Resident Evil fan is that in this section I played, I'm just very excited for it. I cannot wait for it. I now think I understand why Capcom has been so cagey about showing this game off, and I think it's for the better. Trust me, from this small section I played, I cannot wait to play more of it when this game comes out on February 27th. Leon is cool. I think Grace is pretty cool too. Porsche, that's such a weird collab. Hamilton, why do they do that? Guess it's cool for them. No! No!